Hi everyone, my name is Matt Hine. Today I'll be doing a presentation on presenting technical information to a non-technical audience. I guess I chose this picture to open my oral presentation today. I think it really sums up some of the challenges technical people have with regard to presenting a technical message to a non-technical audience. The caption reads, "I'll pause for a moment so you can let this information sink in." Obviously a professor, very knowledgeable in his field, and as you can see in terms of the visual aid he's used in this circumstance, doesn't convey a very succinct message to people who aren't understanding of the context. Um, about myself, I'm a mining engineer, 10 years experience, currently in a management role. And I guess one thing that's been consistent throughout my career um, is observing difficulties engineers have with not finding answers or solutions to technical problems, but rather their ability in communicating those solutions in a succinct way to an audience that may not be familiar with a lot of the technical information. So, in terms of the presentation, the introduction, why we're here and what are we going to learn from it? I guess firstly I'll go through um, engineering and oral presentations from an engineering context, so why it's important to be good at oral presentations and the benefits of doing so. Then I'll focus on what the good do well and looking at that more so from a presentation context, so techniques that are used. From there, that'll provide a good segue, I guess, into stepping through some of the things the bad do badly and what you should certainly avoid. Moving on from that, looking at what the good do well with respect to verbal and non-verbal cues, characteristics, how they behave, mannerisms, certain techniques they use to really engage with their audience. And on the flip side of that, obviously look at what the bad do badly with respect to verbal, non-verbal cues, characteristics, and so forth. And then from there, look, we'll obviously look to wrap it all up, tie in all the key understandings, the conclusions, answer any questions, and really focus on the base points of what I've covered here today. So why is oral presentation and more succinctly oral communication important, and how is it defined? So there's a really good quote there from Morton and Rose, which looks at it from an engineering context. I won't read that quote out, but basically identifies the requirement, certainly for engineers in this day and age, to be really adequate with respect to giving effective communications and how important it is in their role. So why is it important? I guess from a personal level, it's a key competency with respect to your profession. It's important in communicating ideas, theories, work and fundamentals to your peers, your managers, potentially clients. So it's a key way of demonstrating your knowledge and getting that across to getting everyone up to the same page, the same level. Um, and then there's personal motivators as well, finance and personal success. So there's certain studies which have certainly indicated that how good you are at oral presentations can certainly have an impact on how you move through your professional development, how you're viewed amongst your peers and opportunities you may be given in the professional environment. So there's a key motivator there. Obviously with respect to peers, it's recognised as a key competency, so if your colleagues know you're quite good at oral presentations, they'll hold you in a higher regard than those that perhaps aren't. And it enhances their knowledge as well, so it gives them a greater understanding of the work that you work on. It's an education and bringing them up to speed as much as anything else. So how are we going to tie it in and decide what's good and bad, I guess, with respect to oral presentations, presenting a technical message to a non-technical audience? We'll look at academic and peer-reviewed journals. So I guess there's a lot of literature out there, a lot of academic information, which pretty clearly identifies key characteristics good presenters have, and perhaps some we should steer clear of. Testimony and experience, I guess with each component I'll identify an area of my experience or something we'll all be familiar with as examples. And then a pilot survey. So I guess there were some questions passed around on this subject within the course, which I've had numerous respondents, and they've given their feedback on what they think people do well, what they do differently, a bit of a gap analysis on how we tie it all together, and not surprisingly, a lot of the things from the pilot survey tie into the findings from the academic peer-reviewed journals, and obviously testimonies and experiences. So, getting stuck into it, what did the good do well? So in terms of the pilot survey, there were five, I guess, key factors which were identified. The first is face-to-face communication. So it's really important to be visible to your audience. Presentation is key, I guess, in acceptance and certainly opening up your audience, making them feel involved. Next is the simplified content. So don't try and overcomplicate it. Really, your presentation's for your audience. It shouldn't be seen as an opportunity to try and overcomplicate things and put yourself on a higher pedestal with superior knowledge. If they don't understand the message you're trying to present from the presentation, then it's more of a reflection on your communication skills as opposed to their intellect. Uncomplicated language, let's avoid the jargon. So certainly with respect to technical messages, not everyone in your audience may be up to speed with the jargon, I guess, used within your industry. So try and use layman terms. Simplify it as much as possible while maintaining the key points of the message you're trying to convey. And then logically sequenced. So make sure it follows a logical sequence and structure. So for example, if you're giving a presentation on how to change a car tyre, you wouldn't start with tightening of the nuts with the replacement tyre. That's the back end one. So it's important you follow the structure the whole way through so people can follow and really join the dots to a degree. In terms of academics, there's plenty of sources. One source I use, Paget and Yoder, identified every presentation contains just a few key messages. So I guess that ties into the simplified content, uncomplicated language, the sequencing to a degree. Yeah, and these points should be retained, and that's the important thing. The audience walks away retaining the key points. In terms of testimony, well, Steve Jobs, I thought he was a really good example. So in terms of the iPhone, he could have really delved in, I guess, with his presentations on the ins and outs and the technology and whatnot, but his presentations, I think, were so resonated with people because they really looked at, or he looked at identifying people's needs on why the technology was significant, how it could make their lives better, and how it applied to them. So yeah, a good example in Steve Jobs, I think. What did the bad do poorly? This picture sums it up, I think. So leading on from the last slide, from the pilot survey jargon, like I said, avoid those terms that don't need to be used, certainly in terms of simplifying it for an audience with a non-technical background. Irrelevant information, so don't put stuff in there for the hell of it. So certainly leave room so if people have questions you can add in details, but like I said, identify on those key points, don't go back too much into the history of it. That ties in the excessive detail as well, the next key point. Keep it succinct, the main points, so like we said, the audience walks away retaining those key points. And finally of the four, no or poor visual aids. So visual aids are really important, but you've got to make sure they're useful and they back up what you're saying. So you don't want audience members trying to decipher a graph which may have little relevance to your key messages. Make sure the slides are succinct, have a few key points, don't clutter them up too much. They should be entertaining, but they shouldn't take away from the message you're trying to verbally commit, I guess. Academic sources, once again, Paget and Yoder, so they suggest technical material is a challenge for most people to comprehend as it is. So the easier it is for your audience to follow the presentation, the more likely it is to take it home. So like I said, don't overcomplicate things. Testimony experience, well, I went to a wedding about 3 months ago and there was a best man speech, which perhaps in a different audience, it might have been viewed in a different light. But he used a lot of jargon and words which most of the audience would have been familiar with, certainly terms amongst his friendship group, which were quite common, but no one had any idea what they were related to. Irrelevant information, probably a bit too much information considering the people who are in attendance. And yeah, going off the message, it was probably good there was no visual aids, but yeah, look, like most messages, make sure you're prepared and have an understanding of who your audience is. So what the good do well, looking I guess at non-verbal and verbal communication and other characteristics. So the pilot survey identified 4 key themes. First one, knowledgeable. So understand your target, that's really clear. You've got to be prepared and know what you're talking about. You need to be able to answer questions, and if required, go offline and provide a bit more information to bring those up to speed who can't understand the basics you're trying to implement from the start, I guess. Get involved. The presentation should be a two-way street. It shouldn't be you dictating to them. The more you get people involved, the more you assist in developing understanding, I think. So, really important component. Persuasive. So, understand what you're trying to get out of the presentation, what you're trying to communicate, and how you're going to get there. It's important to understand the message you're trying to convey and what techniques you're going to use so that people walk away understanding what you've said and getting on board with it. And then be confident. So I guess this can be a hard one. A lot of people genuinely don't feel comfortable giving oral communication, oral presentations. It's a practice thing. It's a bit of a learned skill. So it comes down to preparation. Do the best when you're up there, and remember, no one's ever died from giving an oral presentation. Certainly not that I could find in my research. So I doubt you'll be the first. Academic, Daniels backs up a lot of those points. So what's he say? Emphasising in the introductions how the proposed design might be relevant to them. So that ties into persuasiveness, how it impacts them. And that's something Steve Jobs did well. And this example to come Bill Clinton, I guess, which we'll look at in a second. Use inclusive language, I and we. So that comes with the involvement. Make the message relevant for them by including them. And then Bill Clinton, I won't go through that there, I'll let you guys read it, but I guess in summary, what it's really saying is his ability to communicate with his electorate by, I guess, applying policy to them, making the common man understand how certain government policies would affect them, what the benefit is and what the downside is. So a really good example there, I'd suggest if you're interested in people who do very good oral presentations, look up Bill Clinton. So what are the poor do poorly in terms of verbal and non-verbal communication and characteristics? So I guess the pilot survey identified incoherence. So basically, don't mutter, don't murmur, be really, I guess, confident with the way you speak, pronounce your words. Too fast, too slow, it can often be hard to really understand how you're traveling. So like I said, perhaps video record yourself and get an understanding if you need to slow things up to really hone in on key messages or whether you can speed things up at times. Underprepared. So it ties back, I guess, with being knowledgeable. Make sure you understand your audience. Make sure you understand the presentation itself, where it's being given. Can it support the mediums you're looking to use, visual aids, slideshows, handouts, all that type of stuff. Understand your audience. Who are you communicating to? What's their background? So it's important to understand their needs. And then anxiousness. So I'm not surprised with that one. A lot of people, when they see someone anxious giving an oral presentation, they're not comfortable either. In terms of academic research, Pappers and Hendricks looked at the effect, technical oral presentations. They look at mastery of skills, so that ties into the knowledge, really important to have that. And then the content, the presentation criteria, and the practice of the group elements. So really backing up a lot of those things. An example I can think of the poor do poorly, impromptu work speeches. So I guess I've seen a lot of management try and communicate key issues to the workforce, and because they haven't been prepared and didn't see certain questions coming, and didn't fully understand what they were communicating, it can turn south pretty quickly. So be prepared, be knowledgeable, and understand your content and your audience. So in conclusion, public speaking, it's a skill. It needs to be practiced. It may not come naturally to you. So don't worry, there's plenty out there who it's not, just a off-the-cuff exercise and easy. Practice makes perfect, so give it a go, get stuck in. In terms of competence and what the good do well, it's been well defined through academic sources. I've listed a few here. There's a lot more in the notes I've provided and the references. And if you take anything away from this, from my side, it's probably a PER, so really keep it simple. P, prepare. So it comes into being knowledgeable, understand your audience, provide visual representations and things which you think will help communicate the message, be prepared for questions, and know your topic. The next is engage. Involve the audience, like I said. Two-way street. Ask their questions, get their thoughts, and get an understanding for how you're travelling, whether you're going too fast, too slow, whether you can move on a bit quicker, all those type of things. And secondly, relax. So if it doesn't go too well, it's not the end of the world. Make sure you take learnings from it, but be sure to give it a go. And I guess the closing message, presentations are for you, not your audience. So As long as you bear that in mind and present the information to you if you had no idea what the topic was about, certainly with respect to technical information for a non-technical audience. Thank you for your time.